Tak, a my můžeme začít.
Okay, so let us start.
První otázkou, která se objevila.
Can start with the first question that we received, asked by Lucie Lišková on Facebook. And she asked whether it was possible in Norway during the pandemic to register as an artist and get the support immediately. So that goes to Anja, I guess.
Can you please repeat it?
Oh, you just put it on. Okay. Yeah. If it was possible in Norway during the pandemic time to register as an artist and to get the support immediately.
It's a hard question.
So probably not.
Yeah, no, because there are registers and there are different registers as far as I know. And people are have their company codes, business codes, which actually is a register where you can also register with your own independent company. And the applications for the crisis schemes were based on the results reported in the registry, the unit registry for all companies. So in some sense, as far as I know, artists are registered. But it was more like how the schemes were functioning and how these support schemes were not made to support artists or culture as such, but more to support companies. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's an answer to the question, actually. But
half, I think.
Half, yeah.
Yeah, but maybe you could put the question to all of you, because that's an interesting topic: how to identify the artists and the creative industry workers. So one of the points is the numbers of the companies, like the registration numbers. Is this the same model that you used? For example, Zuzana, in Slovakia, did you use the same model? Because each of the country has this, but yes, some of the artists, they can be like moving in many directions. So it can be that they have a company for a classic non-creative job, but they are also artists.
It's a good question. I can see what you mean. I think you have to distinguish between private persons and legal persons. So when we did COVID compensation, we had a scheme for individual artists, and it didn't matter what legal form they worked for. They had to register as individual persons on the register. But then when we did a support scheme for businesses, then yes, they didn't register. We used the tax code. We had a subgroup of tax codes proving in which sector you work, and they already had it on their tax register. So then they became eligible for the support. So
that means that for the freelancers, they had to register. You couldn't use their like register codes.
Well, no, because it's a question of the legal form. Not all of them are. Well, we say živnostník. Do you have that?
Yeah, like registered freelance. Self-employed.
Self-employed.
Yeah, self-employed artists.
But some work on authors' contracts, which is then again a different thing. Some of them are employed, maybe, but only part-time. So there is really not a good way to encompass them all. That's why we have the register. And of course, they often have hybrid income. So they could be employed or could work on employment contract as well as freelancing, as well as working on authors' contracts. So it's very complicated.
Sharon, based on what you heard now, what's the situation in Ireland, like shortly? What do you use for the identification of artists and creative workers? Just a moment, we can't hear you probably.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Sorry. It's very complicated. I think there's no one register of artists in Ireland. the Arts Council would have a lot of data around artists that they support, but of course, not every artist is supported by the Arts Council. Not every artist applies to the Arts Council, and especially if you're early stage in your career. So I think there's no one place. And when we were doing various COVID supports, we would have the same challenge in terms of, you know, some people are self-employed, that hybrid income that your other speakers talked about is an issue. So there's no one place, and I think that is a challenge. Certainly with the basic income scheme, one of the interesting things was we were doing a very large-scale survey of, you know, not everybody, because obviously maybe not everybody considers himself an artist applied, but certainly a significant number of them did. So we used the application process as a way to collect a lot of demographic information around what art form they worked in, where they lived, their age, their ethnicity, those type of things. So that was a useful opportunity, but no, there's no single register.
Thank you, Sharon. Mafalda. What about the situation in Portugal?
We just use the tax codes. We have a list of cultural professional tax codes for the physical person and also for the legal person. So the tax codes were the criteria to identify for scheme purposes.
But the physical persons have to have like their profession in the artistic or creative area.
Sorry, have to have?
They have to have their profession, or they have to be like registered for the taxes for artistic or creation area.
Yes, we have a list of codes only for cultural sector, and you can have an hybrid situation as, for example, you work on another field, or you're a lawyer, for example, but you're also a visual artist. And as you can have a lot of codes, if you have one cultural code, you would be eligible. Yeah, so that's it.
Okay, Brigitte.
Well, on the one hand, for self-employed artists, we have a so-called Sozialversicherung, so it's some sort of security system that gave us the figures during the pandemic. So we knew that we had at least 4,000 artists in Austria who are self-employed and who choose to pay security for social security. And there is also an additional body called Künstlersozialversicherungsfonds, which is some sort of additional security or a body that gives grants for these payments you need to pay to the official Sozialversicherung. So this is a take and give situation which is working quite well. And then we have a lot, of course, tons of associations in Austria that are with the intention to be active in the field of arts and culture. And when we gave out COVID aids, they could apply. And you need to have a, you know, when you come up with a association, you need to have a Statuten, you know, some sort of legal basis that shows that the intention of this association is to be active in arts and culture. And this basically gives you also the numbers. But we do not have one single button where we press and where we know this is the amount of artists we have in Austria. And this was basically a big problem during the pandemic. I think the pandemic really helped maybe several countries in Europe to identify the amount of artists. So it really helped us.
Yeah, it seems Isabel is nodding that.
Yeah, well, I tried. In Spain, we use by now tax code. But what happens with technicians, for example, that are in general code that don't distinguish his job from the other jobs, and then we think it's very important to have a register of artistic and professions, but now in Spain only exists in Catalonia and with a few registers, because people don't understand already that this is important register to get benefits of and grants for the artists' professions. And we think when they understand that it's important to be in this register, then probably in Spain will exist as a central register of artists and other professions. You understand me? Yeah, thanks.
Perfectly.
We are both go together for the comprehension.
Two bodies, two minds. So, další otázka z publika, ano?
Are there any more questions from the audience? Yes, hello. I have a question about fair remuneration. I find it interesting. I know that there is this concept of a minimum decent wage. So I wonder whether there is something like minimum decent fee in various artistic fields. Maybe it exists in translation, and this is interesting and useful for the hiring entities, because actually when they have this figure, they know what kind of fee is decent to ask. That it is quite good reference for fees in arts. So my question is whether you have something like that, some minimum wage recommendations in the Czech Republic and then across various countries of our speakers here.
Would you like to answer first? Yeah, so you have some numbers.
Well, what we have is a so-called fair pay, fair play reader the stakeholders came up with probably half a year ago. It's a booklet. This thick, you find it online. And I think this is a process really now spreading all over Europe, that the stakeholders define minimum fees for their sectors, because only the artists can do that. And of course, then we have the tension to EU competition law, because it is not collective bargained in a way, because it's defined from one side only. But this is a very good basis. And we have that for all sectors in Austria. And we know that it also exists in Germany and in Belgium and also in Switzerland and so on. So you have minimum fees. And as an artist, you should never go under those fees. And it's, of course, very difficult to provide those fees. This is the biggest problem, because you need tons of money to do that, but we need to start, and we already did, so it exists.
Anja?
Yeah, I can support that, even though it's not the work from the Arts Council as such, but the interest associations and organizations working with artists to secure their rights, they have this very much as an important and prioritized topic, and they also work a lot up against both the Art Council and the ministry. But as you say, it's not a regulation as such, it's more a recommendation. And what was interesting in the pandemic, when we talk about the pandemic, and also related to the research field, as I said in the last minute, is like what happens when you try to disseminate and distribute in new ways with new initiatives. Then it's also you have the new initiatives, they're growing up from artistic ideas and inspiration, but still, and then it's also hard to some degree to claim it. But that is also about like professionalization among the artist community, and just continue pushing the community to agree that art is art, but art is also work, and hence it should be paid for. So, yeah.
Pafalda?
Or Isabel?
You.
I'm flexible.
Yeah. You can answer for all of them.
So in Portugal, we have just informal recommendations. One for theatre. There's an association of theatre producers. They have a minimum wage list of professions with the recommendation for that minimum wage. And also in dance, but in dance it's even more private than in theatre, because it's an informal collective group of producers of dance field that decided to do this list of minimum wages. We almost don't have collective agreements. We just have one. We are now starting to understand that every artistic work must be paid. Not only that must be fairly paid. Because there is a lot of attempt against a little funding or in trade of little communication or promotion of the artists, ask them to work a little bit. So we are now trying to make people understand that their immaterial work is work, and we know they love to do that. They don't mind to do, even though it's for free, but it should not be for free. So we have a long way to run on this direction.
Sharon, what is your experience? Do you have something like this in Ireland?
We don't have an agreed set of pay rates for the arts sector, but certainly I suppose there's a minimum wage in Ireland, and I know the Arts Council have been working on making a policy for making sure that artists get paid. I agree with your last speaker that you see a lot of unpaid work and very low paid work in the arts, and often people are given opportunities maybe to exhibit or perform, and that's sort of payment in kind. But very much the policy in Ireland is now that you should pay artists for all of their work, and certainly the basic income, while it was loosely based around the kind of economy-wide minimum wage, it was really to recognise that unpaid creative practice, that work that is required to produce art, that all those hours of research and work that artists put in, it was in recognition of that time, and we would absolutely support that artists should always be paid for their work. And that's certainly the policy of the Arts Council and the Culture Ministry as well.
Thank you, Sharon. Zuzana, how's the situation in Slovakia?
We don't have any recommendations for freelance artists. Short.
Isabel, yes?
In Spain, remember we have 17 communities, and only 5 has a collective agreement. But we have a great problem. For example, in pandemic, our government publish a grant for the artists with conditions. The condition it was that only one day of in the system of social security, only one day, and a few actors and actors can get the grant. Then a lot of people stay away of the system, and this is a great problem because we have agreements, social agreements, but a lot of people is out of these social agreements. We have a minimum that we have to pay. We are represented the companies, professional companies on performing arts, not dance, but this is a very great problem in Spain. Mm-hmm. And that's why we need to register the artists and the companies to pay the social security, and the own actor and the own actress that is doing auto exploitation. It's, I don't know the concept. It's when you work without any coverage, because you don't pay. You don't pay yourself. And there's a lot of people like this, and it's very difficult to talk in Spain by now about fair pay, because the own artist can't pay himself the salary. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I tried to translate. Pass my
everything
experience.
Is fine. Okay. Just don't.
I'm studying a lot. But I need more stuff.
Don't apologize yourself. Everything is perfect. K situaci v České republice, kdo se k tomu dokáže vyjádřit? Pavla?
Maybe speaking about the Czech Republic, do we have experts from the Czech Republic? Maybe it will be as short as what Zuzana from Slovakia told us. No, there is no answer, not even a short one.
Já myslím, že je obecně jako ze strany
Well, in general, I don't think there are any recommendations at the level of the state or municipalities, but maybe at the level of artistic organizations. I am sorry, but we have plenty questions here, so I would like to give the floor to our audience. Okay, let's start with this person. My name is Florian Golfier from Visitance. I coordinated a work group focusing on this last year, and we came up with a table of fees with the minimum fees and also an optimal amount for different categories, and we would like to now publish it. However, we realized that the law on competition or the law against cartels was very strict in the Czech Republic. So sometimes you can be fined if you publish such tables with recommended fees. So we would like to publish this table, but we need to figure out how to do it in compliance with this law. Okay, so you basically need a lawyer. Yeah, actually there was a case like that with the Union of Translators and Interpreters who were fined for publishing their table of fees. Yeah, I'm not here to represent a professional organization, but I am representing the OMC group. This is a huge topic for us too. But, as you said, we are in conflict with the EU competition law. There was a case like that in Germany where they wanted to set up a table of fees which would be granted from the public money. They wanted to define the minimal amount, but I'm not sure if this will work out, how and when, because sometimes there is the conflict with the competition law. Okay, I also see Andrea Wolfova. Yes, I represent the Association of Directors and Filmmakers, and we also have troubles in this area. Our clients are major production companies, and when collaborating with such giants, freelancers have no means of dictating the conditions. So I would like to know if you have experience from other countries about how professional organizations can lead collective bargaining. Because in the field of audiovisual arts, this is not often done, but the minimum fees could be fixed and be valorized, which isn't the case right now. We were unable to change this, so we would like to get inspiration from abroad. Okay, and we also have Andrea from the Ministry of Culture. Well, I'm definitely ready to discuss fair pay. We know that there are these issues. We know about the fine for the Union of Translators and Interpreters because it was considered a cartel. And we are trying to figure out how to deal with this. The European Commission already tried to tackle this. They speak of disguised employees, people who work for platforms that resemble employees, for example, this gig economy, delivery services and so on. These people, these workers are disguised employees, but they don't receive the same conditions. And we don't yet have the standards that are there in the US, for example. According to some new information if your profession has attributes of this disguised employee status. This should be provided for. However, it is yet unresolved. It is being negotiated right now, but there is a legislative proposal relating to this, and I think that if it is adopted, it would help very much different artistic branches, because this is really an issue. At this point, as you said, the competition law is tough, and if you publish such a table, you are at a serious risk of receiving a fine or being fined, just like the translators. And this is not regulated under the law of intellectual propriety, but really under the competition law. Yeah. I would just like to have a housekeeping remark. Please stand up when you speak. Johanna Lomová, we represent visual artists. For visual artists, we have no standards. Right now, the city of Prague is preparing a data set about how gallery work is remunerated, because there are no standards as of yet.
Děkuju, ano.
Okay. Who next? Oskar Bruža, Visual Artists Union. With hindsight, I can say that there were first attempts in the 90s. There was an association of graphic designers and architects. First, interior architects came up with minimum fees for their profession. But, as was said, there was the problem with the competition law, which in the end meant that they had to remove these tables from their web pages. There was a design center of the Czech Republic, which doesn't exist anymore. But when we worked there, we decided to opt for another approach. And we now have a mention of this on the page of the non-existent association. We came up with a methodology for remuneration. So it was not a table of fees, but it consisted in doing similar things as are now done with the status of the artist. We were basing ourselves on the fact that the pay is two-sided. The side of the commissioning authority or the commissioning body, and the side of the person who carries out the service. We wanted to provide a guide, and basically we considered the time that is spent, and we were relating ourselves to the average wage. Then there was the importance of the author, a measure that had been used during the communist times. So, for example, if you have a regionally important artist or a national artist or an internationally important artist, then the remuneration would be higher. So this was based on the time, on the work done, but also on the artistic level, if I can say so. And also, we would consider the role of the hiring entity. If it was a small entity, they would pay a little bit less. And in this way, we would calculate the fee. So this was just a methodology. And you could obtain different amounts based on the criteria. Okay, thank you very much. So maybe let's come up with methodologies, not tables. And I think we can now move on.
I think that you can get really good examples how to move on with things that seem petrified. You know, if you come to Czech Republic, we have a lot of ways how to go around even the European law. Okay, so we do methodics, like, so this is exactly what we can do together with Slovakia, because it seems that we have a very similar way how to think in many ways. So payments are first thing that we discuss. Takže platby, nebo teda férové odměňování nebo odměňování obecně je téma, které jsme zvládli. Má k tomu ještě někdo něco, co by...
Do we have any more questions regarding this topic?
Sharon and Oliver, that you're here. No? So we can move to the next direction. A nebo ještě někdo? Ne? Dobře, takže můžeme jít dál.
So let's move on.
Or another question could be, how do the societies at your countries accept the whole discussion around the artistic status? If there is any kind of response on this topic in terms of social discussion around that, or a society discussion around that, or it is something that is, how to say so, a self-absorbed thing inside the community of the artists and the creative industries. Maybe Susanna, Brigitte, do you want to start? Yeah.
I just wanted to respond to the EU competition thing, because I think one of the major tasks of the OMC group is to form an exemption for arts and culture of the European competition law. So this is the goal, because it is simply grotesque to think that the funds in arts and culture can ever be a cartel or a monopoly. So this is basically one of the ideas. And then it will play back to the national legislative level. And then the situation in the Czech Republic will change, and the situation in Austria will also change. So it's not petrified forever. There is something going on the EU level. And then I wanted to say, if you want to simply talk to the Austrian Film Institute, if you want to talk about collective agreements in the audiovisual sector, it exists in Austria. So please simply get in contact with our Film Institute. Okay.
Sorry, I would just like to add to this. It is a different OMC group that deals with the competition law. But yes, it is being done, like it was said. But I don't quite share your optimism, I'm afraid. Because, well, even if this is negotiated, then yes, it means that for falsely employed people, or for people who do the same job as employees but are freelancers, they can negotiate without breaking the competition law, but on the EU level. It means that the EU will like close an eye and not say that, okay, not prosecute, but still, if it's okay or tolerated on the European level, it doesn't mean that it's tolerated on the member state level. So the Czech law can still say, you know, I mean, that make their own decision, you know. I don't think that even if it's tolerated on the EU level, that it automatically is okay for...
Yeah, but on the other hand, that makes it even more easy.
Yes,
it makes it easier, because you can simply change it in the Czech Republic. You don't need to wait for Europe, which is a big advantage.
Jinak kolektivnímu vyjednávání se věnovala jiná konference, která byla v červnu.
Collective bargaining was discussed by one of the events held by the Czech presidency of the European Union. It was exclusively concerned with this topic of collective bargaining, so some conclusions were drawn, are published, and you can actually search for them online. It is a big topic and widely discussed across the whole EU, in Denmark actually, which in Denmark it led to blockade actually in arts.
One of the most important things that we need to discuss, or we need to know, because this is basically probably the last question that we can have during the panel, is how to advocate. How to advocate. I already asked about the question, how the society responds. So this is the additional question, if you can combine these. How the society responds to the whole discussion and how to advocate. What are the best examples that you have? If we are talking about one exceptional person that will be like a flagship that will go within the topic, or it is all the communities and all the associations together with the relevant departments from ministries that go as one unit against the main obstacles, which are mostly the Ministry of Treasure and the Ministry of Social Affairs. Zuzana.
I'm not sure I'd like to start. It's Saturday.
No, okay. So anyone, Isabel.
Well, about your last question about if this discussion is in the society or only in our sector. In Spain is a discussion of the sector, but in pandemic I think the society see the importance of the culture, but the things are not changed. When we can go to the theater and a concert, well, the culture is open, and then this problem is only a problem of the sector. And the law is, is back to the reality of the culture. And in Spain, we are being chirurgically with the changing some questions that affects to the artist. But this is superficial, because the system needs a real study in deeply study of the situation of the artist and of the industry. And we are only changing things about important changes, about percentage of tax income, or about if technicians are included or not in a royal degree. That it's very important, but it's not, in my opinion, we need a real status of the artist. And this is, this needs time and understand our system. And politics and governments don't understand our system. For example, in the last reform of the law of the temporary contracts, all the culture was out of the system because they created a fixed contract and forgot that the artist is a temporary activity, because we depend on the success. And are things very obvious for us and not for the politicians. And all the system has been removed to understand that we need better tools to act. And unfortunately for us in Spain, this debate is only in the sector. When the culture is in all the society and moves the society and vertebrates the society.
Anya.
I can comment on that, because I think understanding is a really important word, and what at least the experience while following what happened in the pandemic, it's also something about the attention given to the arts and culture sector and field, which actually increased quite a lot. I think there never have been media and press covering the art field and the role of artists and also those working in the nearby positions, the relationship between a composer, a performer, a publisher, a manager, the whole value chain, and also how the system is or not is able to fit on these various ties of roles. So I think at least for a good thing about the whole situation is a more unified understanding, but also of artists understanding the political system. So it's an understanding going both ways, so to say, that is much needed if the cultural industries and the artistic field is going to continue to grow. And here also the social security system has to be improved. And the dialogue, as you say, it's only the art sector here, but the dialogue between the Ministry of Industry, the Ministry of International Affairs, and not least the Industry of Labor and Inclusion have to be talked together. So there is a work going on now, and I don't know if white paper is the right word, but all these questions that have been discussed as the status of artists, we are not part of that ONC group, you know, but things, very parallel things are going on as big discussions with huge interests. And also I would say the last thing to mention is also that the interest associations, the units or those working on behalf of artists, what happened in Norway during the pandemic was also kind of that they found each other. Instead of fighting their own profession's interests, they kind of understood that as a field or as a sector, that level of associations have to go together and work stronger. Also with lobbying and also with communication up to the ministry and everything. So that there are several things to learn. And my whole presentation was about the role of research and data in this. So yeah, many things at the same time. But
thank you, Anja. Sharon, would you like to add something? How is the situation in Ireland? So if it is a topic within the society, and how do you advocate it?
I think it's more a topic in the art sector in Ireland. It's a very live topic. Certainly, I think the whole purpose of the basic income was around setting a minimum for artists' time and for that unpaid work. And that was very much that recommendation, and that Arts and Recovery Task Force was, many of its members were from representative organisations, so it's a very hot topic in Ireland. The Arts Council, I think, are doing their pay the artist policy, and they're working with representative organisations, with different artist unions, and some parts of the arts sector in Ireland have, I suppose, recommended pay levels. But again, say while we have an economy-wide minimum wage, that obviously applies only to employees, and artists tend to be self-employed, and that's often a challenge. But it's certainly a conversation that's ongoing in Ireland, and I know both the Ministry with the Basic Income and the Arts Council with their work are trying to kind of set minimum standards for different parts of the art sector.
And do you have an advocate?
Well, I think the arts are very good at stakeholder engagement. They're very vocal. We have lots of really good representative organisations that work with the Arts Council and work with the Culture Ministry. And they're very good at advocating on behalf of artists. But I think it's the nature of artists' work, and that self-employed model and the freelance model can sometimes make it difficult for people because they're negotiating on their own behalf. So we are trying, and I know the Arts Council are trying to develop agreed standards so that there'd be a minimum that people wouldn't fall below.
Thank you, Sharon. The situation in Portugal is ideal because you have the best possible advocate, don't you?
Yeah. We were talking about that during the break. Just answering the first question, the discussion is only within the community. Actually, the rest of the society thinks that we are subsidy dependent and don't understand why the state has to finance culture. So.
Same everywhere.
That's where we are. So we were talking during the break because we have the lucky or the fortunate detail, which is the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is aware of culture, is a good Prime Minister. He knows culture exists and he recognizes some importance on the cultural field. And when the pandemics, as I said in my presentation, we had this first attempt on 2008 to have this status, but it didn't work. And it was with the same party on the government, but another Prime Minister. And now this time with the pandemics, there were some, I know this is strange, but there were some manifestations. There are some gatherings with the distance and the masks on, but there were one professional a day in front of the parliament of each area, for example, with some words on. And this got impact on him, and it was, as we understand, an order from him to the Ministries of Culture, Tax, and Labor and Social Security to gather a working group to discuss this with the community. And on the community, we also had the lucky circumstances that we somehow, as you were saying, Annie, that the little structures decided to give a mandate to some more representative structures on their special fields, on dance or on theater, etc. And they were gathering, the visual artists came up with one association. They had no association in Portugal to be together. And then they came up first with one, and then the second Visual Artists Association appeared during the pandemics to have representatives on the discussion. And they were, I don't know, maybe 10 associations representing technicians, visual artists, performing artists, dance and theater, the union, of course, perform art with employers or companies, institution. And they discussed during 2 years. So the advocacy was more like a political, happy global circumstance than actually a plan.
We're so happy for you.
Thank you. We are happy too. Let's see how this is going to work out, because it's just a fresh new status. And of course, the sector is very happy and very quiet. I think the
quiet?
Yes, a little quiet comparing to what used to be. So I think that this legislative measure just is like of a way of tell them, what are you claiming for now? We have already done this huge step. So wait, now we need to wait a little bit more. And then 2 years from now you can claim again. But now it's just... And they are, of course, saying that there are things that are not perfect, and of course they are not perfect, and the status will be reevaluated in 2 years. And there is already established a working group to do this research on the implementation for these 2 years. So let's see what comes up from them.
Okay, so quiet on the Portugal front. And what about Slovakia?
Well, the discussion about the status of the artist is quite old.
No, you didn't have the mic. Can you cut? Yeah, we'll cut everything you said. Like, you basically were not here.
So, like elsewhere, the debate is mainly internal, and the need for a status has already been, talked about for maybe tens of years. And that came from, I think, the visual artists and the theater, as far as I remember, but it was like it kept coming back, the idea. How to advocate for it to the public. We also had this with COVID, people sending artists to do some honest work at Tesco's, and maybe you had a bit of that.
Yes.
Okay. But also what I heard here was that professional associations or the artists united more during COVID. It's the same that happened in Slovakia, especially on the music front. Because musicians did not really have very professional associations. They were very each man or woman on their own, and they formed quite a large group that actually was one of the voices very much heard to advocate for the artists, and not just musical. You know, they sort of took it upon them to fight for artists as such. But well, my last thought would be one thing is if ideally your minister is the advocate for the artists, but the other thing is if it's going to cost anything, then when you go to your Minister of Finance, data is your best friend. I mean, you can't just say, you know, artists have a hard time. You need to, you know, come saying, okay, look at the National Bank data. This is the drop in the sector. Look at all these other data about how much other sectors lost in COVID, how much artists. Let's look how many freelancers there are in art. This is the national average. This is art. You know, I think it's really important to know the sector and to know the facts, because that's something I think the Ministry of Finance will listen to rather than just like philosophical. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. One last thought from Isabel.
One reflection, because it's curious how many coincidences we have between us about different systems, but I'm hearing you, and it's the same that in Spain, no? And perhaps the difference is the importance of the culture with the budgets, with the money that every country put at our sector, no? But it's the same in every country. The situation, there are a lot of coincidences.
And that's probably the good thing, because in that case we can unite and learn from all the experiences all around Europe. My vám moc děkujeme. My uzavřeme vlastně celou konferenci.
And now, thank you so much for your attention. I think this was the final remark of the conference
Umělce a umělkyně.
On the status of the artist. The status of the artist is underway. In some countries, it is being prepared. In others, some countries are maybe lagging behind, like the Czech Republic. But definitely, we have some food for thought. There are examples of best practice, and the Arts and Theatre Institute is working on that together with other organizations to move on in the debate on this topic, which is part of our cultural policy. We hope to see results already at the beginning of the next year. Also, on our webpage, you will be able to find proceedings from this conference. And I guess that the main message today is that if you want to promote culture, you need to have a prime minister that knows that there is such a thing as culture. So this is probably our task.
A vypadá to, že to je náš hlavní úkol napříč Evropou, aby jsme
across Europe, we need to educate our prime ministers, maybe before they become prime ministers.
Thank you very much for being
so,
here.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sharon. A pokud budete mít ještě chvilku, tak pojďte dojíst to jídlo, protože...
And if you will, you can definitely have some more refreshments, because we have plenty of them here.